Hello, my name is Dr. Catherine Kirby. I'm a family practice doctor, and I've also had a lot of training in personal aspects of life, family counseling, psychiatry, and so forth. When I was getting ready to graduate from medical school, I had thought about going into psychiatry, and then I realized that in everyday life, I would get a good dose of people's personal problems. Today, I would like to speak about sexual abuse from a woman's perspective. I remember in the past, I would hear comments like, oh yeah, come on, right, like a woman is going to remember sexual abuse 50 years later. Like, give me a break. That's just an overactive imagination. Or, well, memories aren't always accurate, which is true. But let me tell you something personally that happened to me some years ago. I had been reading an article in a small magazine about a woman in her 50s who had gone down into her mother's basement to get something, and when she opened this one door into this kind of dank, dusky area, suddenly this memory came flooding back to her about sexual abuse that she had suffered as a child. So some people want to discredit that. And I've read books about women who have been sexually abused and say that it's a very lonely road because no one really wants to hear about it, and yet you are really suffering. We know that child abuse is rampant. It's that sexual abuse is at least 1 in 4 across all incomes. And so I had an experience some years ago where I was reading and working through a workbook to help someone very close to me who had suffered sexual abuse, and it was called the Courage to Heal workbook. And who knows why memories come out when they do. But right after that, my husband came out of the bathroom zipping up his pants, and in that instant, I knew that had struck fear in my heart in the past. It was like snap of a finger, and that memory was there. It really sent me into a tailspin for weeks as I tried to figure out what happened to me. I knew something did, and then gradually as I rummaged through my mind and prayed about it, other sensory parts of the puzzle came back. One was the smell of my grandfather's garage. Now, if you would say to me, conjure up that smell for me, I wouldn't be able to do it. But tucked away in my brain, it was there. It was a smell of motor oil, and I used to think if had someone urinated in that garage, because it just had that kind of an odor. And so, okay, something about my grandfather's garage. And then gradually, pieces of the puzzle came back. And then once I had all the pieces, then I could understand a lot of triggers and that made me uncomfortable. So one of the best analogies that I can give, and it's such a good analogy, I've used it over and over, is that when my husband and I were going to classes for foster care training, one of the instructors said that when her child was just a toddler, she dropped him off at his grandparents' house. They were going to babysit, and it was around Christmas, and they had one of these moose wall hangings that was motion censored, and when you walked past it, it broke out into song. They thought this would be something cute, and so they turned it on. And when her little boy toddled past it, all of a sudden, Mary, and he fell straight back, stiff as a board. They were worried he had a seizure, but it was just fear. Now, she went on to say, he doesn't remember that, but the trigger is there and will always be there. We can't go in like Cabela stores where all of the animal heads are on the wall because he'll feel fear and want to leave. So you may not understand triggers you have that make you uncomfortable because you don't have any pieces of the puzzle. Once I remembered what happened, it explained why I didn't like the big, thick Coke bottle glasses. I remember one time my husband got a pair of those and I said, I don't like those, take those off. Or sometimes we would go to antique shops, and sometimes they would be down in basements or just in like barn areas, lower levels that were kind of dark. And I would say to my husband, I'm going to go sit out in the car. But here's what I really wanted to talk about. When this memory terrified me, parts of the memory that I didn't know what happened, I called people in my family. I have two sisters. One is 1 year older and one is 2 years older. And I called both of them and said, look, I had this memory, something that happened to me as a child in our grandfather's garage. And I mean, do you remember anything? Did anything happen to you? Nope, goodbye. And not to make them seem uncaring, but I think I thought they were gonna call me back, or when they saw me, excuse me, I have an itch, want to know, but no, nothing. And even my mother, a few months after I told my mother, the perpetrator in question died. He was an older man known to the family. And my mother said, I thought you'd go to the funeral. I was surprised you didn't. And I said, Mom, don't you remember what I told you he did? Oh, yeah, that's right. So my family, it reacted in a typical way. People don't want to own that, Years ago, I read a book called 1,000 Acres. I think it was by Jane Smiley. And it impressed upon me that farmers wanted to own as much acreage as they can. And if my daughter marries your son and we both have 1,000 acres, one day that will be a 2,000 acre farm. The three daughters came home because their father was ailing. He had dementia. He didn't have long to live. And one of the daughters, the oldest, I think, sleeping in her old room, in her old bed, began to have these childhood memories of sexual abuse by her father. When she told the other two, one was very angry. And when a woman has a memory of sexual abuse and she shares it, often she can be condemned. Even as to the timing of the memory. Oh, so you're bringing this up now that mom and dad are getting divorced. You're just trying to turn people against him. Or, oh, so now you just magically have this memory when it's our father's birthday or whatever. And the poor victim is made to look like a terrible person. It can be very lonely. And if there's a support group, you can get into a support group. But I recently read a fictional book about a woman whose marriage was crumbling. And she was having spending problems, overspending, hiding it from her husband, lying, anxiety attacks. And it all stemmed back from incest by her brother. So when she went to counseling and when this came out, her family was not sympathetic. They were angry. she's bringing this up. She's trying to split up the family. Her mother, why would you do this to our family? But her husband, whom she might have expected support from, felt like, hey, that's your problem. He had his own issues. He grew up with a mother who had issues and was very needy. And so now his wife is reminding him of his mother, and he didn't want that. So even my own husband, when I went through that, didn't understand at all what I was going through. Some people think, well, that's in the past. Get over it. Why do these memories come forth when they do? Who knows? Maybe it's a time when you're strong enough to handle them, but for whatever reason, this memory has made its way through your subconscious into your awareness. So I'm mainly making this video to give support to women, to men, to children, to whoever have lived with this horror and this lack of support. And then where do you go from here once you've had this memory and you've suffered? Because I will tell you this, that once that memory surfaced, every single time I was in the presence of a man pulling up his zipper, I felt that fear. As a family practice doctor doing physicals, that was a common occurrence in the office to see a man pull up his zipper. The other triggers were already there. Part of me felt relief. Now I understood why sometimes I would have these unexplained periods of sadness or crying without any reason. And the mind not only remembers the events, it remembers when. I remember reading one time that there were people who on a certain day of the year tried to kill themselves unsuccessfully, but the same day every year. And when they delved into it, it was the day that they were unsuccessfully aborted, a botched abortion, and they survived it. So perhaps when I would have these periods of crying without knowing why, it was linked to that. So then you know, okay, I have reasons why I felt this way about certain things. I would recommend going to God. He knows everything about you. He knows your hurts. He knows your sorrows. Finding a good friend you can talk to. Finding a fellow sufferer because they understand the need to talk, to get it out. Keeping a journal can be amazing because there are things inside of you that you're not even aware of. It is life-changing. Just every day, they recommend that you journal in the morning before you really have stepped full force out into the world. When you're still in that kind of hazy world between sleep and reality, to keep your journal by your bed and just write. I would say the first time, make a commitment to fill 2 pages. 2 pages, you say? I'll never fill 2 pages. Yes, you will. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about punctuation. Just let it out. A writer said one time, writing is like cutting a vein and just letting all the words out. It gets you in touch with yourself and how you feel. And I will make some more videos in the future, but for now, I just wanted to reach out to someone that might be hurting, suffering, not knowing where to go with any of this. It really is a Pandora's box. Once it's open, you can't go back. You can't stuff it back in the box. And reaching out to the perpetrator is not the thing to do. And we'll get into that later, why it's not the thing to do. So for now, I'm here. I'll do some more videos in the future. And take good care of yourself, and God be with you.